I'm excited to welcome Luke Ferrell, Global Head of Customer Success at Deel, to our podcast today. Luke, it's awesome to have you. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Love it.
Well, we've got a lot of different topics that I wanted to kind of chat through. One of the things that you and I had talked about was your experience learning Cantonese, where you picked that up, and what you've been using it for nowadays, if anything. Can you tell me some of the experiences you've had developing those skills?
Yeah, I learned Mandarin as a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and then also in the military. So I used to work in the embassy. Coolest job I ever had. Well, don't tell my boss now, but that was the coolest job I ever had. I basically what I do is I adjudicate visas and then do like open source intelligence, go talk to people, see what they would tell me. Super fun. And then picked up Cantonese and Japanese along the way. They're pretty close. And then in the military, used that for a while, and then eventually the Air Force wanted me to learn Arabic, so it was time to get out. And then I've been in the SaaS space ever since. What's fun in like a really global role like I have now is oftentimes I'll get on calls with customers in China where I'm the only non-native speaker and people have no idea that I speak Chinese, and then everybody's going and then I just chip in. And it's I don't know if I think people humor me and they tell me I'm good because the conversation usually switches to English eventually, which probably means I'm not as good as I think I am.
I think one of the things I've noticed with your friend or your family member, like my wife, she speaks a lot of Spanish at her job, but it seems like everybody always wants to practice the language that they're learning. So like you want to speak Chinese or Cantonese, and then the other folks want to speak English. So it's sort of like who is going to push the hardest.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes that probably also drives it a lot.
Yeah. Well, and like if the customer wants to speak English, like I will speak English.
Yeah, exactly. You're not going to take a detour just for the sake of your Cantonese. So one of the, given that you've had this sort of string of really cool customer journey, customer success, customer experience, both at Qualtrics and Deel. You sounds like you were working with, basically customers with the military, State Department, that kind of stuff. How did you figure out the path? Like, when did that start? Was it a serendipitous thing, or was it challenging? What was that like?
Yes, I mean, it's a great thought. A little bit of everything, right? Like when I started out, like I joined, I was in the military and didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I wanted to have an impact. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to do math and stats because that opens up doors. And I think early in your career, in your life, you're thinking, how do I open up more and more doors? And then eventually you have to pick which one of those doors you want to walk through. And so did that for a while. And then I kind of fell in love after the military with like optimizing processes. I loved it. So I worked at an industrial supply distributor. And so like, it's all about like, how do I take 9 minutes and 27 seconds down to 9 minutes and 22 seconds? Loved that. And then that was like the heart of the fight. Like that's what really mattered to the business. And so then serendipitously, like I got a call from Qualtrics and they were like, hey, we're looking for someone with like your math background to run our support team. So I moved over to Qualtrics. Very quickly though, I realized that in the software world, and no offense to anybody who like loves support, but to me, that wasn't the fight. The fight is revenue and product, and everybody else is supporting revenue and product. And so I thought, you know what, I want to get closer to the customer, or I need to go learn how to code better. And I didn't want to do that. so I talked to our then VP of CS and I was like, hey, like if I will build you an ops team if you go teach me how to CS. Because I didn't want to start at the beginning. I think lots of us don't. And so went and did that. And he, having that champion early in my career really helped me. The nice thing was I got to see what really good looked like. Like I got to go see like someone that I really admire and got to work really closely with. And I think that really accelerated my career there.
What was the seeing good? Is that like sitting next to them in Slack? Is this like running webinars? Is this like going on sites? Like, tell us a little bit about what that meant.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a little bit of going on sites. I remember the first time I tried to save a customer. Gosh, it was a train wreck. Like I was sweating. It was terrible. And my boss was sitting next to me and he was like, just log off. Like it was so painful for him that he was like, I don't want to watch this anymore. So it was like, sometimes it's reps, right? Like you got to get those reps. And then it's also because I was running the ops team, it was such a good way to see the whole team. So I could see like what my VP of CS cared about, and I could see what like the head of Americas and what the head of APAC and what everybody cared about. And I could see like deeply like who was doing well and who wasn't. Cause I think sometimes in the business world anyway, like confidence beats competence. And so we see someone really confident and we just assume that they're great at their job. And it's like, they're actually not. Like, I'm looking at the numbers and they're actually terrible at their job, but they present really well. And so it like helped me be able to say like, okay, this is a person who's actually good at their job and I want to learn from.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I love that confidence beats competence. Obviously, at a certain stage, you know, like Kobe Bryant, for example, his competence is going to be so high from all the reps and practice he's put in. But you can kind of fake it early on for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I tell my kids all the time, I'm like, I would much rather you go 0 of 20 when you're playing basketball than 0 of 3. Like, just keep shooting. Yeah,
absolutely right. So like you're at Qualtrics, you started in support, started to move towards CS, and then like with that initial experience, was that, you know, I ask a lot of different CS folks that I've worked with, was the approach for Qualtrics like customer happiness, or was it like customer revenue? Like, how did you guys approach those conversations?
Revenue, like revenue all day, every day. Like, and we just had that beat into us, which I honestly love, because I think sometimes CS has a tendency to get a little bit fluffy. And at the end of the day, you're as valuable as you can show you are. And if you're just like, hey, we moved our CSAT from 4.6 to 4.7, like, I mean, you're a CEO, maybe like, you probably care about that, but you probably care a lot more of like what that 4.6 to 4.7 means for your top line and your bottom line. And so I need to be able to articulate that. And so I'm a big believer in like, I need to show exactly how what I'm doing affects churn, but then I also need to show how it affects upsell, because then I can go and for every dollar that my CFO gives me, I can say, I'm giving you $1.50 back or $2 back. And then that gives not only me, but also the department a larger seat at the table.
Right. Yeah, I 100% agree. I like doing activities that lead to customer retention and expansion for sure. And I think a byproduct, hopefully, of that is like a great product. You know, the customer is genuinely like enthusiastic about your product. But yeah, you just make them happy and they're not willing to, you know, pay you. You can't have much of a business there.
Yeah. Well, and I think like eventually you can do a lot to cover up a bad product with manual effort. But if you don't have like that product loop feedback and you're not continually driving, like you're going to stall out eventually. And I've like, and I'm not saying I'm great at that. Like I've done that before where it's like, we just work really hard, but we don't go make the product better and go force that. And then like you've got a really hardworking CS team, but like, what does that mean?
So like once you kind of transition to CS, like at what point did you start, I guess, managing a team, small team, big team? And what was that like to have to maybe change the mindset of I'm working with the customer directly all the time to I'm kind of managing this team and helping them be effective? And like, what were some of the initial things that you learned along the way?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I'll back up a little bit. So I started out in ops, and then I'm a big believer in like play where you can win. Right. And so if I had gone and said, like, I'm going to go lead an enterprise CS team and I'm going to go be really polished, and I'm going to go do the on-sites with the $10 million contract, like, I don't think I would have won there, because that's not where my skill base is. I talked to a lot of veterans getting out of the Air Force, and they're like, oh, I want to go do AI. And I'm like, you're 35. You have a degree in history. And like, they're like, well, I'm going to go learn AI. I'm like, cool. But there's a grad student who's been doing it for the last 10 years who's going to kick your butt, and he's going to cost half of what you cost. Like you just don't have value there. And so for me, I was like, I'm going to win in analytics because I'm deeper than any other CS person there. When I was at Qualtrics, now I'm terrible at it. It's been a long time. But so I started out in scale. And I just said, like, I'm going to go build scale programs. I'm going to be really analytical, and I'm going to drive there. And so what was nice is I had a little bit of expertise to lean on. And then I was able to build a program instead of having to jump into something like that I didn't know. And so that's where, like, I started out being able to offer a little bit of that expertise. And then as I grew, it was more of like, how do I get other people to go and build their career instead of being like as hands-on? But that's something I've had to learn over the last 5-7 years.
So on the scale side of things, if I understand that correctly, that's presumably smaller customers, but many of them, and you're building programs to communicate them more or less because what, like you just don't have enough ability to staff people to those such small accounts, more or less?
Yeah, and it's hard. Like it's hard to make it make sense financially, right? Like if you have a bunch of you have a customer who's spending $3,000 and you have thousands and thousands of them, right? Like at Qualtrics at the time, it's much bigger now, but it was like 110 to 150 million dollars. So it meant something, but it wasn't big enough that like this $3,000 customer you're going to go do QBRs all the time with.
Right. Did you find, like, of the activities, the Pareto, like, did you find one thing that most often was most effective to getting them to renew or expand?
Yeah. I love, maybe this is just because I grew up with a tiger mom, but I love telling people like where they're not good and being like, hey, you right now, people I feel like love to be evaluated. So I love to come in and I say, right now on the platform, you are doing a C+ level job. And then where you can get to a B+ is ABC. Because now, like, I know if somebody tells me I'm not getting an A, I want to know how to get an A. And I'm going to go do it. I look at LinkedIn all the time. And they have like, you're a LinkedIn all-star, you're not. And they're doing things that like, don't matter to you. They're like, put your address in or do this. But I'm going to do it because I want that little badge that tells me I'm an all-star. Maybe I'm just easily manipulated, but.
Sounds like maybe a little bit of both, but I mean, if it works, right? Like you said, yeah, that's pretty interesting. Okay. So, and then like, as you figured out these scale programs, were they really sophisticated? Or, I think some people think, man, like you pointed out before, like behind the scenes, it's like a crap show, right? Like what was it like on your end?
Yeah, I mean, it was super simple at first. Like we were just like, let's email people and see, like, first we want to know, can we get people to pay attention? And then if we get them to pay attention, will they do what we want? And then if they do what we want, will it affect the outcomes? So those are like the three things that we're always thinking about. And so just trying a bunch of different things. And first time I did it, like learned a lot. There's a lot that I would do differently because I blasted so many emails and people got so sick of me. I'm like, I probably got our domains, but shut down by Google, all sorts of bad stuff. But like, as long as it goes back to those three things all the time, like, will they look at it? Will they do something? Will them doing something affect what you want to affect? And if it does that, like, you're probably pretty good.
Yeah. And I think just to kind of echo your point about communicating with customers, I feel like if your customers are not at least occasionally complaining that you're trying too hard, then you're not trying hard enough. Like,
yeah.
You want them to say something like, hey man, could you dial it back a little bit? Or, click the unsubscribe, but sort of either way, like you need to have that signal, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I look at right now at Deel, we have a ton of customers that don't, they have one or two contractors. They're very small customers. But I've found a big indicator of future NRR are those customers engaged or disengaged? And you can define engaged how you want. Like, do they talk to you once every 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever. But I think you do have to be the voice in the back of their head that says, if you have a problem, you know where to go. And if you don't have that, then they're going to go somewhere else.
So after you mastered some of the communication styles, the scaled outreach, moving from an ops to maybe customer leader type thing, and you're starting to, I don't know, starting to think about your next thing, or like what was the evolution of your time from ops to CS to leadership at Qualtrics, and like you kind of start wanting to move over to Deel? What was that?
Yeah, that was super interesting because I had a good leader. Name's Danica. He's great. An Irish, good Irish name. But he basically was like, hey, at some point you're going to have to choose. Cause I was living in both worlds. I was like, I like doing CS and I like doing ops. And he was like, look, you can be a great leader in either one of these, but you got to pick. And so I looked at it and I said, you know what? I want to go be in CS. And so did that, pushed really hard on that, and got to grow my team, grow into more of like the enterprise motion. But then what I wanted was, and maybe this is just like overly ambitious for me, but I wanted to be able to run not just like my team, which I view as very core CS, but I also wanted to run a department where I could run programs. And so after I felt like I'd seen some of that, I was like, okay, it's time to start looking. And so that's when I went and looked. I ended up at Outreach and was there for a couple of years. And I feel like I really learned a lot there. Tons of stuff I could have done better. But that was, for me, I wanted to be able to marry those two things back together. And so that's where I thought like leadership was important and the next step for me.
So you're at Qualtrics, which you mentioned grew from like 100 million. So I think now it's over a billion for sure, easily.
Yeah. I think it's like 1.5 or something. Yeah, it's big.
Yeah. And then Outreach was a sales automation product. We're a customer as that also grew fantastically over, quite very, very quickly. And so at this point now you're at Outreach and you're managing a team now of folks. And when you mentioned programs, like what does that mean? Tell me more about
like that. I'm a big believer in CS. Like the system should be the hero, not the CSM, because the CSM will work really hard, but it's like you have an operating rhythm where people should talk to the customer at this point and they should do these things. I love, and maybe my CSMs hate it. You'd have to ask them, but like, I love like having a call to action. I don't want to have to think about it. I just want it to happen. And then the CSM to go do it.
I think it would be hilarious if like I was like, actually I did, and they're going to join the call now and tell us
it's
here they are.
Great shows. Guess who we've got backstage?
Yeah, exactly. So like even with now you're developing a leadership style. It sounds like, it's push to communicate, set up operating rhythms, use analytics. Like what are some of your top, I guess, methodologies or leadership principles that you followed or sought to develop when you were at Qualtrics, Outreach?
I think the one thing is like, what should I be doing when I'm doing nothing? Because otherwise, I think it's really easy for customer success. Like when you think about, I don't remember whose matrix it is. It's like the urgency versus importance. You end up doing like low important, but urgent things because customers are going to come to you. People who are hired into customer success definitely are the type that want to satisfy customers, but people are going to come to you and your day will be all reactive and you won't do the high value things. And so you need things of like, okay, when I'm not doing something, what should I be doing? So I love one thing that I've done at Deel that I really love is we have a framework. I call it Golden Deel because I'm not a marketer and I can't come up with great names, but it's essentially how do we want the customer using the platform? And then I give CSMs points based on how their customers use the platform. And then I bonus the CSMs based on how many of their customers are golden. And so they have now an incentive. So if they're not doing anything, they should be thinking like, okay, 25% of my portfolio is golden. How do I want to get it to 50? So I get the next tier of bonus. I'm going to go reach out to those customers and get those customers golden.
So it's sort of like a continuation of this Tiger Mom philosophy that you grew up with.
That's all. This is not important at all, but I'll tell you, I have two brothers and my mom in her office has 3 shelves. And she puts one of us on each shelf and she puts us on different heights of shelves based on how we're doing in life.
Is there like a qualification matrix for this or do you guys just have to figure out how it works?
Yeah, the most important thing, she cares about like financial and business success. She cares about number of children and she cares about educational level. So my brother finishing up his physics PhD with 4 children is making it tough for me.
Very interesting. I love that. I think I might have to have a Christmas project where I have a shelf for my kids.
I tried to get my mom to do it for daughters-in-law and my wife did not think that was funny.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, definitely do not do that. Interesting. Okay. Now what about like, what else did you learn at Outreach? So you've developed all these sort of operating rhythm, how you communicate with customers. Like what was the biggest difference between your experience with like development and learning from Outreach to Qualtrics?
Like at Qualtrics, I saw a lot of like get good, be advisory with customers. At Outreach, I learned more commercials, especially because I was at Outreach when the tech kind of recession hit. We had all free money for a long time. And then all of a sudden it was consolidation and, license cutting, all of that. And I learned like speed matters more than almost anything. Because what we would have is, Outreach and SalesLoft, or someone would say, I love Outreach. It's a 9 out of 10 on tech, but Salesforce is offering me their engagement tool for free and it's a 5 out of whatever. And you have literally like a day, maybe, to go and get in deep with someone and change their mind because it's so people want to move fast, especially when you're talking to salespeople. They want to sign a deal and they want to move. And so I learned that it had to be done and it had to be done right now.
I definitely resonate with that. The CEO of Snowflake, he often talk, or I guess the previous CEO of Snowflake, he always talks about like creating urgency with your team. How did you create the urgency with your team? Did you help them understand that deal deal cycle, whatever you want to call it, that one day was like, it was a make or break and they wouldn't hit their number without that understanding? Or how
I didn't, being completely transparent and being honest with myself, like I didn't do a great job of it at Outreach. I learned it at Outreach, I think. Like I learned how important it was, because sometimes we would lose these consolidation plays. And I had been in a place before Qualtrics where things moved a little bit slower, not the pace of business, but like a consolidation play, or maybe it was the time because it was free money time, but it got tight while I was there. And so that's something that I brought with me to Deel. As I said, like, I'm never going to lose because I'm going back to a customer and I'm like, hey, we'll see what we can do. We'll figure this out. I'm a big believer in errors of commission are fine, but errors of omission are not. And so if I go to my CEO and I'm like, look, I offered this customer a sweet deal and this is what I felt like I had to do to retain them, I'm never going to get in trouble. But if it's like, hey, I had to go back to deal desk and I had to go do these things and I lost the customer because I wasn't moving, I can't live with that.
Yeah, I think another great aspect of your philosophy here is just that CEOs don't want to have to be the decision maker. I mean, most managers don't want to have to be the decision maker. You much prefer somebody coming to you and saying, I did this, or I've got this idea, what do you think? As opposed to tell me what to do. I don't know what to do. You know, it's sort of a very different approach, but I think a lot of people miss that.
Yeah. And I think like that's also how you grow in your career, because I think early in your career, you're going to be wrong a lot.
Yeah.
But if you're not taking those shots, you know, going back to Kobe Bryant taking 20 shots and missing them, if you're not taking the shots, then you never know that you're wrong. And then when the high value shots come, you're not going to be confident in taking them. And so like over time, I'm still making the same decisions. I'm just right more often than I'm wrong. Whereas earlier in my career, I was wrong more.
What about presumably, and I'm guessing based on the geography, but you know, Qualtrics is based in Utah, which I think, you know, it's where you currently live. And then Outreach is based in Seattle primarily, right?
Yep.
So did you transition from an in-office guy to a remote guy, or what happened there?
Yeah, it was actually really scary because I was at Qualtrics when COVID hit, and then I moved to Outreach, and kind of the talk with Outreach was like, hey, I don't want to move during COVID. We'll reassess when COVID ends. And you know, we expected COVID to be 6 months, and it took forever. And so when Outreach was coming back in office, I was a little bit concerned about it because like, you don't want to be the one guy that's not in office. Luckily by that point, it was for me, it was kind of time to move on anyway. And I landed the wonderful opportunity with Deel. And so Deel is 100% remote and always will be, because that's what we sell. And so I feel like I wouldn't have been ready for Deel if it weren't for Outreach, me being remote that whole time, because I wouldn't have known how to manage in a remote environment and I wouldn't have felt comfortable myself.
Have you found, okay, so now you're at Deel, you're like deep into this remote company, man. Like literally the product is built for remote teams. Your company's remote. You're away from the office now. Are you starting, or are you way past the point where you're figuring out how to manage a remote team? Is it a big challenge? Do you find it pretty similar to what it used to be like, you know, with Qualtrics?
You know, I certainly wouldn't say I've 100% mastered it, but I feel pretty comfortable. And I think the biggest things are like, you have to over communicate on like what the outcome is that you want. And then it feels micromanaging. And again, this is where you should have someone hiding and then say like, we actually asked them. But like, I feel like you just have to follow up with people more often and have super clear communication. Like, what did we do this week? What were our accomplishments? And it'll feel micromanaging at first, but I've found that people actually enjoy it. Like, they want to know that you see them. Like, remember when you're in office and your boss comes and sees you, how good that feels? I think the same is on a Slack DM when you're like, hey, that project you're working on, how is it going? I need an update. Like that, it's kind of the same mental feeling.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that as well. I remember my first job. I was in New Hampshire. I worked for this tiny little company. It was like 2 million ARR. And the CEO would always walk by my desk. And a lot of the time I was there early or around the same time he was. And he would like drop a Harvard Business Review magazine on my desk. And my job was to like find potential customers. So I'd use that to prospect. And then we would just like chat about it. And we didn't even have much of a conversation. We didn't get to know each other, but he was just like, hey, that felt great. I loved it.
Yeah. Like we all want someone to just like pay attention to us.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely right. There's a couple more things that I'm curious about on the customer success side. From Qualtrics to outreach to Deel, you kind of talked about on LinkedIn a couple different places where not scaling CS too early, and kind of having some patience. What does that mean, and why is that important?
Yeah, it's so tempting because you look at your financial KPIs and you're like, okay, right now we have $3 million per head, and we could get to $6 million if we cut the bottom half of CS off and we send out emails and talk to people. The problem is, like, you really don't know what impact that has on your customers. You don't know what your customers want, and so you can't really advise them. And so it becomes a really garbage in, garbage out system. And unless you go and do the due diligence of understanding and tracking everything that you do and understanding and tracking the outcomes and then A/B testing a lot, you're not going to have a framework set up, and it's going to be so messy unless you're like the greatest data scientist in the world, which most of us aren't. Then you're just going to have noise. And maybe you'll even get false noise where you'll be like, oh, this one campaign we sent out about like peanut butter and jelly or whatever it is the campaign. And then you start sending it to all your customers and you're not really driving revenue. And then your team is just spinning its wheels. So I come from the scale side of the business. And so I'm a huge proponent of don't scale too early. Like, get your operations in check before you go scale, and then be advisory and then scale.
There's a lot of really interesting stuff that's coming out as far as AI, customer bots, customer success, and how you could partner with these tools. So, for example, I interviewed the CEO of Gainsight. He talks a lot about how CS plus AI could be a great combo.
Yeah.
How are you seeing some of these tools that are either new or been around for a while helping your teams be great or better?
Yeah, I love it. Like, we're looking at a lot of things. Like, I love like Superhuman, where you can go and make your email really efficient. I think you can go even deeper. Like, we have an AI within Deel where we can just plug that into people's emails and have suggested responses. Like, that's so much easier. So I love that kind of stuff. I also love being able to aggregate and share information. Like, right, we have phone calls, we have Slack, we have email. There's a plethora of information in there. But one, not everybody sees it. And then two, you're not able to pull all the insights out. So being able to see all that, I think, is huge. And then I think it's a big deal for product as well, because I need to know why customers are upset. And so let's say I have a bunch of customers who are upset about terminations, and then we go fix something in our termination flow. Then in the past, I haven't known who to follow up with. And so these customers who are giving me all this feedback and they're upset, they don't know that we've actually improved the thing that they're upset about. But now with AI, I can say, tell me everybody who was upset about this, pull it into a list, and then I can shoot them an email and say, hey, that thing you were upset about, guess what? Now it's great.
Yeah, that's amazing. One thing that you mentioned was just this idea of like going faster in email. I feel like as a young employee sitting next to somebody or my boss, if I had a question, I could just be like, hey, can you help me with? And with remote, it becomes a little scary. You're like, who do you ask? Am I going to be annoying? And potentially now you have this AI who can be that person to just quickly tap on their shoulder and ask them a quick question. You answer your email faster, summarize the information. It kind of breaks it down a little bit.
Yeah, I think that makes a big difference. I think it's also like setting up the culture. I know my boss does a great job. He huddles me all the time, just randomly, which is like, at first you're like, oh man, what did I do? But it's great because it creates a culture where now my CSMs will just huddle me.
I like that. A friend of mine is CEO of a company called Alto, and they hired I think it was the former CEO of Chobani. And he, as a CEO, was not accustomed to phone calls. He's more of a Slack guy, whatever. Yeah. And the new CEO would like call him all the time. And he was like, what is going on? And then later he's like, I love it. It's so great. Yeah. So actually that's kind of a segue into my next question, which is, high pressure environments. You've worked at 3 companies that are moving fast, doing great things. How do you like make sure people are doing the right thing in this high stress environment without falling apart? Like, can you help with that, or you just have to hire people who want to be there? What's that like?
I think you have to hire people who want it. And then you have to constantly remind them that it's okay to feel crappy. There's, I think it's Alexi Pappas. She always talks, she's an Olympian, and she talks about the rule of thirds, where like anytime you're trying to achieve something great, a third of the time you should feel great, a third of the time you should feel okay, and a third of the time you should feel crappy. And like, if those numbers are out of whack, you probably have a problem. So if you feel crappy all the time, like maybe you're pushing a little bit too hard. But if you feel great all the time, like you're probably not pushing hard enough. I also constantly hang on. My first head of CS, Brian Stuckey. He's the president of Qualtrics right now. When I came over to CS, he probably doesn't remember this, but it had a huge impact on me. He basically said, look, no job is going to make you feel more like you've got it all together one way, and then you're going to cry on the way home. And so I recognize that when like I feel crappy or when other people have a bad day, I'm like, you know what? Like sometimes you're not going to feel like you have it together, and that's okay.
I think that's great advice in the workplace and at home. I'm a parent, and I feel like I'm definitely falling into that a third. Maybe like a third most of the time on the bad stuff. But final question for you. Obviously you're far from being done with your career, but let's say you transition from X to Y, customer success, into something else. What's kind of like the most important legacy type stuff that when you think about people that work with you or the programs that you built, what do you think people, or what do you want them to feel or know or think about what you did?
I would say if I could have anything in my career, I want like a Andy Reid coaching tree. Like I want 10 other heads of CS, because then I feel like when I was in the military, I felt like I was doing something good in the world. Like I felt like I was making the world a better place, and people can debate that, but I felt that way. And then when I moved into the commercial world, I was like, I sell nuts and bolts, or I sell surveys, or I sell sales. And like, does that change the world? Probably not. No offense to experience management. But if I can go and change people's lives, like if I can go and get someone to go and become a VP or have an opportunity that they wouldn't have had in the past, like that's meaningful to me. And that's one reason that I really love Deel is like we hire global. I can hire someone in the Philippines and change their life and change their kids' lives. And that is meaningful.
I love that. It sounds like a very cool legacy of helping people change their lives. Hey, well, Luke, it's been awesome talking to you, and thanks for joining us today on our podcast.
Thanks.